Scrappy is at his breaking point after everything he's been through. The heartbreak, the betrayals, and the endless drama. It seems like he just can't take it anymore. Fans are in complete shock as disturbing reports emerge that Scrappy may have reached his lowest moment yet. Sources close to the rapper reveal that he's been spiraling ever since Bambi walked out of his life. Now, in a heartbreaking turn of events, he's allegedly attempted to end it all. Whispers of a devastating cry for help have sent shockwaves through the industry. Family members are scrambling, friends are desperate to reach him, and fans are left wondering, how did it come to this? Could this really be the end for Scrappy? And most importantly, will Bambi step in before it's too late? Stay tuned, because what we're about to reveal will leave you speechless. Scrappy had always been known for his resilience. No matter how rough things got, he always found a way to push through. But this time, something was different. This time, the pain seemed unbearable. The weight of his heartbreak, betrayal, and loneliness had finally caught up to him. Now, sources close to the rapper reveal that he may have done the unthinkable. It all started when Bambi, the love of his life, walked away. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of passion, fights, and makeups. But this time, the breakup felt permanent. And Scrappy? He wasn't handling it well. Friends noticed the shift in his behavior. His usual vibrant energy had dimmed. His social media went unusually quiet. His once lively presence had been replaced with cryptic messages hinting at his deep emotional turmoil. "I just don't know how to move forward," Scrappy reportedly told a close friend during a late-night conversation. "Everything feels empty without her. Nothing makes sense anymore." Fans began speculating that something was off when he posted a series of Instagram stories, each one darker than the last. One particular post caught everyone's attention, a black screen with the words, "What's the point of it all?" written in white. Within minutes, his followers flooded his DMs with messages of support, urging him to stay strong. But little did they know, things were far worse than they could have imagined. The people closest to Scrappy knew he was struggling, but no one realized just how deep his pain ran. Over the past few weeks, his behavior had grown increasingly erratic. He stopped showing up for studio sessions, missed important meetings, and even ghosted some of his closest friends. But the biggest red flag? He started drinking heavily, something he had once sworn he would never do again. One of his longtime friends, who wished to remain anonymous, described the moment they knew something was terribly wrong. "I went to check on him, and man, I didn't recognize him. His house was a mess, bottles everywhere, blinds strapped tight like he didn't want to see the light of day. And the way he was talking, it scared me. He kept saying, 'I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm tired, bro. I just want this pain to stop.' I tried to get him out of that mindset, but I could see in his eyes. He wasn't okay." As the days passed, his family grew increasingly worried. His mother, Mama D, was one of the first to notice that something was seriously wrong. Like a lifetime, friends and family sat in silence, their eyes glued to the door, waiting for any sign of news from the doctors. Mama D paced back and forth, her hands trembling as she whispered prayers under her breath. Then finally the door swung open. A doctor stepped out, his expression unreadable. The room fell silent, hearts pounding in anticipation. "He's stable for now," the doctor announced, his voice heavy with caution. "But he's not out of danger yet. The next 24 hours are crucial." A collective sigh of relief swept through the waiting room, but it was quickly replaced with fear. Replaced by the sobering reality of what lay ahead, Scrappy had fought his way back from the brink, but the battle was far from over. As news of his condition spread, social media remained ablaze with messages of support. Fans, fellow artists, and even those who had once been critical of Scrappy came together in an overwhelming wave of love and encouragement. The hashtag #StayStrongScrappy began trending worldwide. But amidst the support, there was also concern. Would this truly be a wake-up call for Scrappy, or would he fall back into the same cycle of pain and self-destruction? Some sources close to him admitted that this wasn't the first time he had struggled with his mental health, but it was by far the most serious. "He needs real help," one insider shared. "Not just a quick recovery and back to the same old habits. He needs therapy, support, and most of all, people around him who genuinely care." Meanwhile, Bambi was reportedly in tears upon hearing the news. Despite everything, she couldn't shake the guilt weighing on her. "I just wish things didn't end up like this," she confided to a close friend. "I never wanted him to hurt like this." In the coming days, the world would watch closely, hoping for signs of improvement. Would Scrappy finally take control of his life, seek the help he needed, and find a way to heal? Or would this tragic night be just another chapter in an ongoing battle? Only time would tell. One thing was certain, Scrappy's story was far from over, and everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what happened next. Stay tuned for updates on this developing story. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay in the loop on all the latest drama. The moment Bambi stepped into the hospital room, the air grew thick with tension. Scrappy, still weak but awake, turned his head toward her, his eyes filled with a mix of pain, longing, and something even he couldn't define. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The past, the heartbreak, the shattered promises, it all hung between them like an invisible barrier. Bambi swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she finally whispered, "Scrappy." His name barely left her lips before emotions hit him like a tidal wave. He wanted to be angry, to ask why she had left him when he needed her the most. But instead, all he could say was, "You came." She nodded, stepping closer. "Of course I did. You scared the hell out of me." Her voice cracked, betraying the emotions she had tried so hard to suppress. "What were you thinking?" Scrappy exhaled sharply, looking away. "I wasn't thinking, Bam. That was the problem." She sat beside him, her eyes glassy, with unshed tears. "I never wanted this for you. No matter what happened between us, I never stopped caring." He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Didn't feel like that when you walked away." Bambi's lips parted as if to respond, but she hesitated. She knew anything she said wouldn't erase the hurt. Instead, she reached for his hand, and to her surprise, he didn't pull away. "Scrappy, you have to fight. Not for me. Not for anyone else, for yourself. This can't be how your story ends." For the first time in days, Scrappy felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was the warmth of her touch, the raw honesty in her eyes, or just the realization that he wasn't as alone as he had convinced himself he was. Mama D, standing in the corner, watched silently, her heart breaking and healing all at once. She knew this conversation wouldn't magically fix everything, but it was a start, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. As Bambi squeezed his hand, she whispered, "Promise me you won't give up." Scrappy hesitated. His demons were still there, whispering in the back of his mind. But for the first time in a long time, their voices weren't the only ones he could hear. Finally, he exhaled and gave a small nod. "I'll try." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was enough for now. Scrappy lay motionless on the cold hardwood floor, his phone still clutched in his trembling hand. The room was eerily silent except for the faint hum of the TV playing in the background. Empty bottles and scattered pills lay beside him, a haunting testament to his breaking point. Diamond's breath caught in her throat as she rushed to his side. "Scrappy. Scrappy, wake up." Her voice cracked with panic. Panic! She shook him violently, her fingers frantically pressing against his neck, searching for a pulse. It was faint, too faint. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "I need an ambulance now," she screamed into the receiver, her voice barely holding together. Time blurred. The paramedics arrived, their movements swift and practiced, yet the urgency in their voices betrayed the gravity of the situation. They lifted Scrappy onto the stretcher, an oxygen mask strapped to his face, as they rushed him out. Mama D arrived at the hospital within minutes, her body trembling as she saw her son, tubes and wires keeping him alive, the heart monitor beeping in an unforgiving rhythm. Her baby. Her Scrappy. She fell into the chair beside his bed, gripping his lifeless hand in hers. "God, please, not like this. Don't take my baby." Outside, the world was in chaos. News of Scrappy's overdose spread like wildfire. Fans, friends, even celebrities flooded social media with prayers and messages of support. But in the hospital room, there was only silence. A waiting game between life and death. Then a flicker. Scrappy's fingers twitched. His chest rose, deeper this time. A strained breath escaped his lips as his eyelids fluttered open. Mama D gasped, pressing her hands over her mouth. "Baby." Scrappy's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Mama?" Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed in relief, cradling his hand against her cheek. "You scared me half to death, boy. What were you thinking?" Scrappy swallowed, his throat dry. I don't know." But he did know. He had been drowning, lost, broken. And for a moment, he had let the darkness win. Mama D wiped her tears and cupped his face. "Baby, listen to me. This world ain't done with you yet. You're here for a reason, you hear me?" He nodded weakly, but deep inside, he wasn't sure. And then, the door opened. Scrappy turned his head, and his breath hitched. Bambi stood there, her eyes red and swollen, locked onto his. For the longest time, neither of them spoke. Too much had been said. Too much had been left unsaid. Then, she stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Scrappy, I thought I lost you." Scrappy clenched his jaw, his emotions warring inside him. "Then why does it still feel like you broke me?" His voice cracked, raw and filled with years of pain. Bambi sighed, looking down. "Because love doesn't just disappear, Scrappy. It lingers. It aches. But that doesn't mean it was good for us." The words cut deep. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that they could have made it work, that all the pain was worth it just to have her by his side. But deep down, he knew she was right. Mama D stood up, wiping her eyes before placing a gentle hand on Bambi's shoulder. "I'll give y'all a minute." She stepped outside, leaving them alone with nothing but their ghosts. Bambi pulled a chair closer, her eyes searching his. "I never wanted this for you, Scrappy. Seeing you like this." She swallowed hard. "It breaks my heart." Scrappy exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Then why does it feel like you never cared?" Bambi's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I cared. I still do. But loving someone isn't enough if it's destroying you." Silence filled a room, thick with things left unsaid. Scrappy finally looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you still love me?" Bambi hesitated. Too long. And in that hesitation, Scrappy felt his heart break all over again. She took a shaky breath. "It doesn't matter." Scrappy let out a hollow laugh, his head falling back against the pillow. "That's all I needed to know." Bambi reached for his hand, but this time, he pulled away. "I need to figure out who I am without you, Bambi," he said, his voice steadier now, even as his chest ached. "And I don't think I can do that if you keep showing up just to remind me of what I lost." Bambi's lips parted, but she didn't argue. She knew he was right. She stood slowly, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. I hope you find peace, Scrappy." He nodded, staring at the ceiling. "I hope you do too." As she walked toward the door, she hesitated just for a second. But she didn't turn back. And for the first time, neither did he. Because some love stories don't end in forever. Some just end. And maybe, just maybe, that's okay. The end. Jess's fans believed that little Scrappy was on the mend. Then the unthinkable happened. He was taken to the intensive care unit, and his condition took a terrible turn for the worse. At the hospital, loved ones are frantically praying for a miracle, and there is an overwhelming sense of despair and heartbreak. Scrappy is reportedly in agony, and Bambi, his estranged wife, has been spotted with her face buried in her hands, unable to control her emotions. According to family sources, Scrappy's condition is critical. As we analyze every tragic detail of this heartbreaking crisis, the last vestige of hope for the beloved rapper is still hanging by a thread. Late last night, as sirens echoed through the air, his condition took a terrifying turn overnight, leaving everyone in complete panic. They are demanding answers from doctors who seem reluctant to acknowledge the severity of the situation. Medics are rushing to stabilize him with urgent tests, but the prognosis looks grim, and his team is pleading with people to send prayers. When Scrappy was declared stable a few days ago, fans rejoiced, thinking that the worst was finally over. However, fate had other plans, and something had gone horribly wrong. Insiders reveal that for the past few days, Scrappy had been feeling exhausted and dizzy. Within minutes, Atlanta Street emergency responders raced to a private residence, and Lil Scrappy was being wheeled out on a stretcher, his face pale, his body barely moving, and the tension in the air was thick. Disregarding it as the aftermath of his previous health scare, everything changed last night when he collapsed. Family members immediately called 911 in a panic, but by the time paramedics arrived, his condition had worsened. His breathing was labored, and his pulse was weak. When the news broke, social media went into a frenzy, with one fan tweeting in shock. But it was horrifyingly real, and what was happening behind those hospital doors was even more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Then came the first devastating phone call. Mama D was the first person to arrive at the hospital. As soon as she stepped in, she let out a gut-wrenching scream, pushing past nurses and security who tried to calm her down. If you know Mama D, you know that nothing stands between them. Nurses rushed to action, strapping oxygen masks, inserting machines, and beeping frantically. But what's even more terrifying is that the doctors were unable to determine what was wrong because his vitals were unstable, and his body wasn't responding to treatment as they had anticipated. After storming into the intensive care unit waiting area with her son, demanding answers and demanding to see Scrappy with her own eyes, no sugarcoating, no assurances, her heart broke. Through the glass window of the ICU, she saw Scrappy lying there motionless, wires hooked up to his body, machines monitoring his every breath, and doctors huddled around him, whispering grimly. That's when it hit her that this was much worse than she had imagined. She put her hands on the glass and whispered, "Baby, you got to fight, you hear me?" For those who don't know, Scrappy and Bambi's relationship has been nothing short of a